The Kremlin said on Monday it would continue to talk to a group of African countries seeking to mediate in the conflict with Ukraine, notably at a Russia-Africa summit next month. On Saturday, President Vladimir Putin gave the seven-country African delegation that met him in St. Petersburg a list of reasons why he believed many of their proposals were misguided, pouring cold water on a plan already largely dismissed by Kyiv. Senegalese President Macky Sall and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa led a delegation including leaders from Zambia, the Comoros and Egypt's Prime Minister that traveled to Kyiv on Friday and St. Petersburg on Saturday. They met both Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Putin. Ramaphosa presented Putin with a 10-point peace initiative from 7 African countries and told him it was time for Russia and Ukraine to start negotiations to end the conflict. For analysis on the Africa Peace Mission to Ukraine and Russia, I'm joined by Kenneth Mwenda, Professor of Law at the University of Western Cape, South Africa. Professor Mwenda, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther.
Very interesting story here and scenario. Your reaction first to President Ramaphosa's comment following their visit to Kyiv and Moscow that the mission was impactful.
Great observation. First of all, I should preface this by saying that we are looking at the contribution of African leaders to the process as opposed to the conflict itself. I think Ramaphosa is on solid ground. There's need for dialogue. This is in line with aspirations of the United Nations General Assembly that has passed resolution to end this war. So I don't think the 7 leaders that traveled departed from the spirit and intendment of the UN General Assembly resolution. If anything, they were fulfilling that resolution. So I know there have been some cynicism from critics that why are they going there with the stuff going on in Sudan? They could focus on Sudan. But, you can have both a domestic internal policy as well as international relations policy beyond the continent. And the African Union also is on board. They're also looking at the issues in Sudan, for example. So an ambidextrous sort of approach, whilst you're using the left hand to deal with the Western world or international community or whatever you call it, there's the right hand which is working at home domestically.
But then on the other hand, Putin had a list of reasons, as we said, why he believes many of their proposals were misguided. What's your take on that?
The most important thing in negotiations, there's a science behind it, is not to focus on the position of either party, but the interests of the parties. That's very important. We can negotiate the position and shift the positions, but we can't shift the interests of the parties. So, and I think this was a good fact-finding mission for the African leaders who traveled there. They now understand the problem better. So it's a sort of a process, it doesn't happen overnight. But we do expect that other members of the international community could emulate what the African leaders have done.
On the other hand, President Zelensky was very hopeful. He said, he thought what the African mission proposal would freeze the war. But Putin, of course, has said, the opposite. So what next?
Again, it's interesting because one other thing that we should remember, the history of the African position in many countries has been that we have friends in the international community, but we don't have enemies. That's the spirit of the non-aligned movement, and that's, I believe, the spirit in which the 7 leaders were going to Kyiv and Moscow. They did not go there to take a side. They went there to find a solution or to offer proposals to end the war. I think this must be made very clear. Although during voting at the United Nations General Assembly, for example, South Africa, I think, abstained from voting. Zambia voted against Russia. But they went there as a united front, irrespective of their individual positions. And the united front is that they are not taking sides. They remain as mostly non-aligned states in the spirit of our forefathers, the Kenneth K Mwenda and Nyerere's non-aligned movement is still alive.
So do you feel that the African leaders achieved anything? What are they taking back to the continent?
One of the critical objectives of the mission, although the peace plan, the details of the peace plan have not been laid out fully to the public from the media reports that we have. But one of the core, I think, elements of the mission there was to de-escalate the conflict. And I think communication dialogue is the beginning of this process. And we do hope that other stakeholders can come in from either EU or so forth. But the most important thing is to remain impartial, neutral, and autonomous in the process. Because if you're invited in by any of the two parties, you will be seen as being biased. But they voluntarily went there in an impartial, neutral, and autonomous manner to see how they could help.
It couldn't have been said better, Professor
You're
Kenneth.
most welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Kenneth Mwenda is a professor of law at the University of Western Cape, South Africa. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, Americans celebrate the newest holiday, Juneteenth, when U.S. soldiers informed slaves they were free.